You know, we've all seen it. The comments sections, the harassment, just the raw toxicity you find online. But what if it isn't just random? Today, we're going to dig into the idea that online hate isn't some accident. It's actually a product of power, anonymity, and yeah, some of the darker corners of human psychology.
So let's just start with the big question right off the bat. When you see all that awful behavior online, is it just noise? Is it something that just happens by chance because, it's the internet? Or is there something way more intentional going on underneath it all?
All right, let's dive in. The whole analysis we're exploring today says nope, none of this is an accident. In fact, it argues that these behaviors are deeply, fundamentally tied to some of the most basic and sometimes, let's be honest, darkest parts of who we are.
And here is the absolute core of it. Online harassment isn't just random static. It's about power dynamics. It's about who has power, who feels like they don't, and how the internet has created this perfect storm where all those frustrations can be unleashed with zero consequences.
Now, to really get a handle on this, the source material suggests we need to look back, way back. It brings up a really powerful and, I'll admit, pretty heavy historical example that gives us a shockingly clear lens to see what's happening online right now. Just think about this for a second. During World War II, you had people who turned on their own neighbors, people they'd known their entire lives. They didn't just wake up one day and become evil. What changed? Their circumstances. Suddenly they were given power, they were given permission, and in that new reality, their sense of shared humanity could just vanish.
And this is where it gets really chilling, right? When you draw a direct line from that history to our world today. Back then, the trigger was state-sanctioned power and permission. Online, the trigger is anonymity and a total lack of consequences. The result, though, is disturbingly familiar. Neighbors became enemies. Today, total strangers become targets.
So here's the bottom line. The potential for this kind of behavior, well, it exists in a lot of us. It just needs the right conditions to surface. That perfect cocktail of perceived power and no accountability. And the internet, it's created those conditions on a scale we've never seen before.
Which brings us right to the main tool that makes it all possible. The weapon of anonymity. This is the engine that takes real-world feelings of powerlessness and transforms them into online aggression.
See, digital anonymity isn't just about hiding your name. It creates this psychological space where all the rules of society, where the law itself feels miles away, almost like it doesn't apply. And for someone who's just simmering with anger, that lack of identity isn't a shield, it's a weapon. And this quote just perfectly nails the psychological twist, doesn't it? The person hiding behind that keyboard might feel brave, like they're finally free to speak their mind. But the argument here is that it's the exact opposite. It's actually cowardice, born from an inability to deal with things face to face, just dressed up to look like freedom of speech.
Okay, so if this is all about power and frustration, why are certain groups targeted over and over and over again? Well, that brings us to a very specific type of this behavior, harassment, and especially misogyny, used as a tool for control.
I mean, it's the question you have to ask, right? Why are women so often on the receiving end of the absolute worst abuse online? Is it really about what they're saying, or is there something else going on entirely?
And the analysis here is pretty blunt. It's almost never about the actual topic. It's about dominance. For someone who feels powerless in their own life, attacking a woman online gives them this cheap, fleeting sense of control. It's an act of trying to assert power, not to have a debate, and really, it just comes from a profound lack of basic humanity. But look, this isn't just about pointing fingers at the trolls. This kind of behavior needs a certain environment to really thrive. And that kind of shifts the focus onto all of us and what our collective responsibility is in this digital world.
Because here's the tough part. Society really starts to fail when this stuff becomes normal. When we just shrug and say, that's just the internet for you, what we're actually doing is creating a culture where this abuse is allowed to grow. Our silence, whether we mean it to or not, starts to look a lot like approval.
And just look at how we talk about it. We make excuses, right? Someone says something truly hateful, and you hear, oh, it's just an opinion. Or it gets defended under this huge banner of free speech. But the reality is, this isn't about opinions. It's about dehumanizing people. It's not about freedom. It's about a total, complete lack of accountability.
And this might be the single most important thing to take away from all of this. The internet isn't some separate fantasy world. It's a mirror. The hate, the misogyny, the power trips, they don't just appear out of nowhere online. They are reflections and, frankly, amplifiers of the problems that are already right here in our society.
So we're going to end with a question that turns this whole thing right back around on us. The conditions for this behavior, the power, the permission, the anonymity, they're available to pretty much everyone online. The real test of who you are isn't how you act when the whole world is watching. It's how you act when you think no one is. So, when you are anonymous, what will you choose?